Welcome back to the game plan. We are here in Sorgy Story Studios in quarantine. I'm Anthony, here with my daddy.
I am Daddy. This is part of our Baseball Buddies series. We can't be going to baseball games right now because as we tape this, we are still stuck in COVID-19 safer at home mode, and obviously we know about the discussion of when baseball is going to begin, but the fact that, well, there's probably not going to be fans going to games for a long, long time. So we can't be going to games. We can't be going on Brewers road trips, but we can sure plan them. And we have our third city in our series. And where are we going to?
Cleveland.
He's got the air guitar going, of course. And we will get to the rock and roll piece of Cleveland in just a little bit. Before we get into each of our top 5 picks of the things to do in Cleveland, we need you to hit that subscribe button. Put a little like on this video and comment with what you would love to do in Cleveland, the ideas that we give you and the ideas you have, places you've gone to Cleveland before that you love and that you enjoy. But we're going to start with this little man's top 5 in alphabetical order, and what's number 1?
Number 1 is the Great Lakes Science Center. So it does have a NASA exhibit. It's right on Lake Erie, pretty much.
Yes.
That's really cool. They've got kids exhibits. Don't they have like a planetarium?
I believe that is part of what they have as well. So it's like a lot, what you see with a lot of different, either natural history, although not in this case, but more science museums. They have a lot of planetariums, but not a lot of places have NASA exhibits, which is so cool. It's ode to John Glenn, who's from Ohio. But what's so really cool is that there's an actual Apollo spaceship inside that museum.
Yeah.
They grabbed an Apollo command module from the Skylab missions with the original Skylab space station back in the 70s, and it landed back on water, and they brought it to this place in Cleveland.
Wow.
The stuff that you can't do, that we can't do in Milwaukee, that we can't see, that's what we love to do when we go on our Brewers road trips and experience things that are so unique to the local place, including in Cleveland. Number 2, Milwaukee doesn't have a former Major League Stadium that still exists. Cleveland does.
Yeah, it's called League Park. Babe Ruth hit his 500th home run there. It started with a 9,000 capacity, went all the way up to 21,400.
Which back at the time was, especially if you're talking like the teens in the early 20s, wasn't that small of a stadium at the time.
Yeah, then it was actually only used during the week because wasn't it Cleveland Stadium used on the weekend?
They built Cleveland Municipal Stadium, this gargantuan 85,000 seat stadium, in the 1930s. They were hoping to get an Olympic Games in Cleveland. It didn't happen, but it eventually became the home of the Cleveland Rams and the Cleveland Browns. For baseball, it was too big for weeknight games. I mean, 10,000 people at a 75, 80,000 seat stadium is not a good look.
Yeah.
So they set up the games to be played at League Park during the week.
Yeah.
And then when you got your big crowds on your Saturdays and Sundays, then you use Municipal Stadium.
It's 460 in center.
Deep shot to
It
field.
was, and it was home to the Cleveland Indians. I also think there was a museum.
Yeah.
Or there is a museum right next to it.
There's a museum on site that is an ode to the stadium, that is an ode to Cleveland baseball history, and not just the Indians when they won the World Series in 1920, but the Negro League Cleveland Buckeyes when they won their title in 1945 at that stadium. And by the way, that museum also has a signed baseball with Babe Ruth's signature on it, along with Willie Mays and a few others. So that is definitely a place to check out on the baseball side of things before we get to the ultimate piece of our Brewers baseball trip in Cleveland, which involves
the home of the Cleveland Indians, Progressive Field. There are possibly 8 spots on the tour, 6 guaranteed. Some really cool spots, including the dugout, the batting cages, so some really cool things that you might be able to see. It is home to the Indians. It was built in the 90s when they had a huge wave of old school kind of parks coming in.
Yep, along with Camden Yards in Baltimore, which really started that way.
Yeah, and it has some great views of downtown Cleveland if you're sitting behind home plate.
Right behind home plate or along the first base side. And you found some very unusual seats and vantage points to possibly enjoy during the game, right by the bullpens.
Yeah, so right by the bullpens, it's like right by the field, but what's really cool about it is you can get up close to the players, and if you're full out in gear of your team, especially if it's a road team, the players might actually take one of their balls and tuck it under this little crack to you. It's happened before.
He's been dreaming about this.
Yeah, and it can fit a baseball. It's this teeny crack that is just able to fit a baseball, where the players just put it under the crack and give it to the fans.
And the ability to have interaction between the bullpen and fans is what can be so cool about the experience of going to a Major League game. We had that at a Brewers Blue Jays game that we went to a few years ago.
Yeah, because it's just getting. I think it was the Blue Jays bullpen catcher threw me a ball, and I have to say one thing: go watch our Oakland video to know about this.
We want to make some sounds by the time we're at the bullpen.
Yeah, it's a thing that they do in Oakland for the visiting bullpen.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Here in Oakland, when they're actually pitching, is when there's not actual action going on in the field.
On that note, speaking of making sounds with your mouth, so much of that is involved with the vocals of music and rock music, which takes us to a place you mentioned earlier. That is number 4 and probably number 1 in most people's hearts when they go to Cleveland.
Cleveland Rock,
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Some great exhibits. The Hall of Fame. Then you've got a cafe that takes up a level of the thing.
Yeah.
A huge cafe. It's right next to Lake Erie.
This was built in the mid-90s, right about the same time as Progressive Field was built. And they had already had the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in existence, but there was no building for it. And Cleveland was the city where rock and roll radio first began in the 1950s, which is why eventually they chose Cleveland as the home for the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And there are so many fantastic exhibits to check out there.
Yeah.
I want to see a lot of the historic guitars that some of the greatest musicians in history ever played.
I would hope that they had something on Les Paul, the Wisconsin native.
The man who invented the electric guitar, the man from Waukesha, whose Gibson model Les Paul is so much a part of the fabric of rock music. You see so many great artists playing the Gibson Les Paul guitar. I would imagine it's probably there. We will have to check that out. But that's not the last of your picks in your top 5 in alphabetical order.
Yep.
There's a building in town where you probably can see that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and a lot more of the beauty of Cleveland.
The Terminal Tower Observation Deck. It is only open on the weekends, April through December, so that's good to know.
For our baseball trips, yeah.
And it has great views of downtown and Lake Erie. It's in downtown next to the public square, and it has 42 stories.
Similar to the U.S. Bank Tower in Milwaukee, but I think it's a bit taller. It's actually a bit higher. That 42nd level is a bit higher off the ground. It was the tallest building in the world outside of New York City when it was constructed.
Yeah, that's
which is
really
so
cool.
incredible to think about. And to be able to go to the top of that and get such great views, that is outstanding.
Yeah.
Now it's time for my top 5. I always give him first dibs and then take the next 5 batch. And one of those comes from a movie which we still haven't shown you yet.
Nope.
A Christmas Story. The Christmas Story House. It's located on 11th Street in Cleveland. It was the home that was the setting for the classic Christmas movie where Ralphie and family called home, where you heard the line, "You're gonna shoot your eye out, kid." And no, the pole incident with the tongue in the pole was not inside the home.
Yeah.
But there are so many artifacts from the movie. And the house is kept in the exact same way that it was when they filmed the movie back in the early 1980s, set in the 1940s, right around the time of World War II. And they have some of the old vehicles that were in the movie on that set, and you can stay overnight there.
Wow, interesting.
It's a pretty penny, but you can stay overnight there. So we probably have to get a big mint and maybe, I wouldn't say win the lottery, but Daddy's going to have to get a higher paying job for us to stay there sometime. But that is a fun experience if you ever can do that. Number 2 for me, Wisconsin doesn't have any national parks. Ohio does, pretty close to Cleveland. One of them is the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. It's east of Cleveland. Beautiful, beautiful scenery. Very similar to what we experienced with Minnesota and Minnehaha Falls.
Yeah.
They have their own set of falls, Brandywine Falls, a little bit shorter than Minnehaha, but still beautiful. A 50-foot waterfall. You get about a 1.5-mile trail to get there, so that's going to be a place for some good exercise and to be able to see the beauty of nature so close to the city. They also have a trail called the Ledges Trail. It is about a 2 to maybe 2.5-mile hike through rock formations that you rarely will see, at least locally here in Wisconsin. It's not necessarily as scenic as the hikes that we could have taken in Arizona or California with all the mountains.
Yeah.
But for the Midwest, it ain't bad. Number 3 also has that sort of natural attraction to it. It's also east of the city. It's called Observatory Park. What would it be like to go stargazing at night through a telescope?
We could have done that in LA, but I think it'd be really cool.
And here you can do that using the telescope that was originally used by nearby Case Western Reserve University. And the public can use it. It's not, say, this massive Hubble telescope like they have in outer space or some of the biggest observatory telescopes that they have in the world, but it's pretty darn good. And the fact that the public can use it is a rare thing to find when it comes to the world of telescopes and astronomy. So that is a cool thing that I don't think a lot of people, even in Cleveland, think about doing. And it's an evening type of program. Maybe we do stuff during the day in the city and then head out there at night. That could be real fun.
Yeah.
Other cool views.
Yes.
Number 4, we debated on this one, and he was very kind to let me take this one.
I was like in between 2 spots, and I was like this. I was like, which one do you want? I'll take the other.
I appreciate that. The Solstice Steps. It is west of downtown Cleveland. It's in the city of Lakewood. And we live on Lake Michigan here in Milwaukee, where you will see some of the most beautiful sunrises around. It matches what it looks like perhaps off an ocean because you have the sun coming up over the east. Lake Erie's got an advantage though. You can get that during the summer, and because it faces north, you can get the sun going down over the west-northwest. And this set of steps that's right along the lakefront, there are people that will gather there and just sit, maybe have some dinner, and just watch the sunset.
And if it's a really good sunset, you might even hear a big applause. And
Better than a golf clap.
Yeah.
The last of my top 5 picks of things to do in Cleveland, we've done similar here in Wisconsin, but again, the fact that it's so close to the city is such an advantage.
Yeah.
Right by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right by the Cleveland Browns Stadium, right in that whole area, you also have a National Historic Landmark with the U.S.S. Cod. They named a submarine after a fish that we eat for Friday fish fries.
Yeah.
But this was a historic World War II submarine. It is the last one fully intact that is still in existence. So you step inside this submarine, you step inside history. You step inside something that helped America and the Allies defeat Hitler and the Axis powers in World War II and help save democracy, really.
Yeah.
You can go through the torpedo room. You can go through the officers' quarters, which are probably no bigger than this room we're sitting in, our palatial studio / playroom.
Yeah.
But it's much bigger than what the crew's quarters were, because basically think of your bed and maybe 2 feet up and a rectangle that surrounds that. That's your quarters.
Okay.
That's all you have to store all your stuff and to sleep in, because you have very little space available for a crew inside a submarine, so you have to really be compact. Yeah. So you can't take all your baseball cards if you're going to the Navy. But that's what we would get a chance to see when you look at a place like the U.S.S. Cod. You experience the history and the fact that, again, it's in that lakefront museum and entertainment and sports district. That's part of what has made Cleveland come off its rise. These attractions that make people want to go to a city that maybe 20 years ago wasn't thought of. Now it is, a lot like Milwaukee is now.
Yeah.
So, the other thing though is when you go to a city like this, you gotta eat.
Okay.
And we have thought of some fantastic spots to check out to eat. That's coming next in our series on the game plan. Our 5 favorite food picks for Cleveland. What do you need to check that out?
Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, 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 ding.
For my favorite dingling on this planet.
I'm not a dingling.
Little buddy, I'm Daddy. Let's euchroify this and get out of here.
Song from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Bye.